Good evening, dear people. This might be a little bit different stream, more focused on the story and on the journey. But first, let me assure that you can hear and see me. All good? Philip Wilson, thank you. Simon. So let's just start with what I've been working on these past few days. Haven't been much sleeping, much eating, just focusing on just some of the ideas that came to me about a week ago now, and something that deals with the chapters. Simon Storch, yes, all good. I think you might have even guessed what that was about. In the thumbnail, the chapters have some kind of a signal visuals like a television, and this is also where I think the ideas came from. In order to create a much more cinematic experience to Machina Arcana, there might be a different way to approach this, because we all know the old way of using chapters like a combination of illustration. Then you have the wall of text, the poetic context of where you are, and then the set of rules and abilities. And that was like from the first edition up to now 3.5, and it was always like this. And then there was an idea that came even before, when I wanted to work on the signal, to create something much more cinematic. And this is actually why the whole idea of the signal is being born, because of the wish to a little bit reduce the tactical side and just focus on the experiences that are more narrative based. And that's where it came, like that idea that like a comic book, like an RPG comic book that needs to be developed. And this is where I went with the idea of signal and worked on that. Leonardo, good evening to you too. So I've been toying with these kind of a cinematic comic book panel ideas for quite some time, but I always saw them as a new game that I want to work on, a completely separate new game. But then one evening it came to me, well, can you do the same with Machina Arcana? And I never thought about that before, but then I had some ideas and I put my thinking cap on and started to think about all the possible iterations and variations of that system. How could the chapters of Machina Arcana look like if I'm not constrained with the same formula of chapter being a set of illustration of a text and abilities. And in this presentation you're gonna see a couple of, I would say, a proof of concepts that I just worked on, and trying to find the best archetypes of these variations that fulfill the cinematic, the storytelling aspect, but it also enables the abilities to define the scene in a much more specific manner. And this is what I'm going to show you. So without further ado, I'll go into TTS and let's see where we are. Of course, if you have any questions or whatsoever, please just ask, of course. So this is the what we all know. And if this would be a normal scenario, normal chapter, you would flip this to the top side. You will see the illustration at the top, and below you would see the text and the abilities. What I'm gonna show you now is a completely different way that I need to go a little bit into the story as well, but I'll try to go along as we show like all the panels. So let's go with the first one. This is some kind of intro, and it's a scenario that will connect to the signal game. But in order to do that, it needs to go into a little bit of a context or where we are, so what Machina Arcana is. So it's gonna have some lore that you might be familiar with it, but somebody might not. So you will also see now some of the ideas behind Machina Arcana, what explorers are, and what's their real purpose. So the first one, the first on the top, actually shows, not the first chapter, I would say the whole scene is like one scene, not chapters. And the first panel top talks about the Machina Arcana as well, but I'll just read, of course. Tales of the enigmatic mountain known as Machina Arcana echo through time. From its icy enclave, expeditions and experiments have yielded technological leaps, unveiling truths long shrouded by the veil of ages. Scattered across the globe lie numerous ancient ruins, most of which have been forgotten by time. Yet, amidst their silent decay, various factions with dubious motives have discovered their significance and began to probe their newfound ties to the icy mountain. So this talks about all the previous expeditions and what was before with so people are familiar with what that is. The first that ventured inside hold a crucial role. Their bodies, mind and soul are fused with her. Each explorer is inscribed within its etheric vault, ready to be summoned through peculiar ancient instruments called chambers of Natus. As her children, they have a unique set of powers, which makes the summoned explorer the most valuable asset. And actually now the actual scenario happens, and this is like in the cinematic title, you know, when you sometimes see in the movie, like this is like a prologue actually, and then this is the start. So you even see it today. And sorry. Now the assignment is straightforward. Now this is more like how the plot develops. But what's important to see is how we actually changed the way of immersing the session people with the plots, instead of giving a very long winded sometimes talk about where we are, where it's very hard for everybody in the room to really visualize. Sometimes the magic happens, but most of the times you have a lot of players who still need to know to learn the game, and then they're not very comfortable with just listening and understanding how the game is played, and then just relaxing on listening to poetic prose. So sometimes it's easier to go in this kind of a maybe much more action style. So this is one idea, an archetype that shows the prologue in a different format. Then as we progress, and above is the prologue, this is the start, then we go to the next one. So if you understood, this is actually talking about Machina Arcana in general, This is about you as explorers, and in very short ideas what you are actually and how others are actually using you to their own needs. So you are, maybe think of yourself as an agent, and the assignment is straightforward. So you have a mission, and the mission is to go inside into one of those ruins. And I'm not going to talk too much about the plot, but it's also interesting to see how the plot is connected to what's actually presented on the chapters itself. So you were watching from different angle before. Now you're in there, so you actually stepped into that kind of a arcanic ruin, like a version of Machina Arcana, but that can be very local, not in that icy mountain in a continent, but on a different parts of the world, universe, time, whatever. So let's see where we are. Sentinel has pinpointed the arcanic ruins where House of Bliss conducts their unspeakable experiments. And now you see how the abilities are intertwined as inside each panel. It just flows logically. You don't need even to put any numbers on them. I mean, it just, you know what goes first, what goes second. Hybridizations, unholy fusions of flesh and something else. If we can extinguish the arcanic reactor and salvage their research, all the better. Explorers move up to one space. And I need to tell you, so this is all just a proof of concept, and I just cropped these abilities from the existing chapters. Later I do have some abilities that I've made myself, but this is just to toy with the idea, to see how it works with the game, how the gaming experience would be altered by it. And then after that, so you came inside, the doors or the stones are already closing behind you, you continue, and the very air thrums with eldritch energy. Can you feel it? The anomalous whispers of this place. They call to us. We are not intruders here. We are home. And you play here. So this is 7 and 4 ratings you have. There are some maybe conditions, some enters play abilities, and that's it. That's another like archetype of setting the scene. And what's interesting is how you can set the scene in the number of steps. It does not need to be everything just on one big place. Okay. The next one is, so let's say you finished one chapter tile, there was a exit token, and you all exited for that token. Then there's a new chapter. Then you see that above, the screeching and slithering are closing in, the exit there just ahead. Now it just continues into that kind of an intermission way. The abominable roars are now just echoes. For now we are safe, tracking following leads. Brothers spoke of others from the seed, another house. And now this is also some idea that came with this, and you see how, what will you do with the research papers? And you have 3 options: ignore, burn it all, and take it. So I thought, why not use these sliders to have like 2 sets of keys, if you can, like 2 flags. Like for lose horror token, that means if you had something here you would lose it. Gain spawn token, you place a count on that side. For gain horror token like this, you know, there are then maybe some abilities that work with this, you know, based on the number of these tokens in some kind of end games. And what's most important is this, the idea that you can have a very different approach of immersion, of interaction of just transposing players into the actual thing, not abstract, not just, chapter space, but research papers, and that there are repercussions based on the things that you choose. So that's an interesting also idea with this. Then one more, the last idea is with actions. The idea of how can we make actions much more memorable and much more evocative. So this is what came to me. So on the first side, you see that this is some kind of a not mini game, but a chapter that you need to pass because it's a blocking chapter with its own 7-4 and a condition like 4 times you need to explore, activate an event space to go to the next chapter. And then on the next chapter, you're also in that kind of an in-between scene where stuff happens, you see what happens, and there are some abilities that you can play normally. But then you are directly placed in a different scene. And this scene, for example, has an enters play ability. It has a text, what happens, and then it has 2 actions. And you see how each of these action has a name, it has even a thumbnail, an action how you activate, and what happens. Interesting. To me, it is very interesting. And but before I had a very clear way on how to approach this Vivarium, not just one scenario but a set of scenarios with the traditional way. Now if I toy with this idea, then it creates something much more than just a normal scenario. It creates a very cinematic and I would say very potentially beautiful experience where the players are actually immersed in a way that I haven't seen before in Machina Arcana sessions. So the question is, does it make sense? It would mean more work, but it could potentially mean a better product. So the question is also to you, the public, what do you think about these ideas? I would like to get your feedback and then decide. There's no rush at the moment, but things are looking pretty good. If you have any questions, of course I'm gonna be there sipping my tea, and then I'll get back to thinking about all the other ways how I can use this new idea. That would be all for this stream.